to get that level of support in Hamilton Mountain in such a short period of time is inspiring and exciting for us moving forward into the future. People need to appreciate and understand that the campaign doesn't start when the writ drops in the election. The campaign starts 3 months, 6 months, 3 years before that.
Welcome back to Northern Perspective, everybody. I'm Ryan.
And I'm Tanya.
And today we have a special treat for everybody. One of the Conservative candidates that ran in the recent election that unfortunately just missed it has decided to come on the show today and talk about their recent experience. And this is someone who had helped make some major gains in one of the recent local Hamilton ridings of Hamilton Mountain. Ken Hewitt has joined us as a recent Conservative candidate. Ken, welcome to the Northern Perspective.
Well, thank you so much for having me.
No problem. So this was a tough election for everybody. It was tough in terms of all the circumstances that aligned, how Donald Trump seemed to insert himself, completely changing, I think, the entire political landscape almost overnight in Canada. And you had Mark Carney coming in, being anointed as the Liberal leader. But all of that aside, all the candidates had to get to work. And from what we've heard from everyone we've talked to, it was a fight the whole way. What was your take on the campaign?
Well, I had the interesting perspective that when I started, the Trump information, the tariffs and all the things that had already changed with respect to the Liberal government and a new leader. So my situation was a little more unique in that when we started into the campaign process, all of those sort of obstacles were there. What was more unique for us was that starting after the writ had dropped and trying to get the team together, trying to get fundraising and some dollars to be able to support the campaign together was eminent and paramount for us in that fact that we only had about 2.5 weeks really to run our campaign. So that was what made us a little bit different than a lot of other ridings.
Now, for those that are watching, they may have known who their candidate was going to be for months, for a year. When did you find out that you were going to be the candidate?
I found out the writ dropped on Monday morning, as you know, and I found out Thursday that week, about 5 o'clock in the afternoon. So we were full engaged within the campaign across the country, and we were still sitting back wondering who the candidate was going to be, whether it was myself or someone else. And we really couldn't do anything until that announcement was made. And so by the time we got our literature and our signage and office space and a team ready to go, we were 14 days into the election. So we really only had roughly 14, 15 days to campaign.
So what unique challenges did that present?
A number of challenges. I think what people don't understand and appreciate unless they've been involved in a campaign is behind every elected official, there's about 100 to 150 people that help. And so it's very difficult to ask people to give up their time to help if you're not actually announced as the candidate. And so we needed to get that part done. And then we needed to get some people in place. We needed our team, our executive team to help with the CFO and our social media team. We needed to be able to start canvassing a list of people who were going to help us hit the doors and get out. So all of that behind the scenes was the real biggest challenge for us because we were gobbling up important time to be able to actually get in front of the people and get our message out, as well as getting my brand, being a Hamiltonian by nature in terms of my youth and being born here, but not being here for so many years. My name really was unique and new to the riding, and so we had to do some branding pretty quick.
Right. And you weren't, just so everybody knows, you weren't the only one that was selected that late. There was many across the country that were selected that late, but I think the Conservatives were far ahead of the other parties in terms of getting their candidates in order. So what do you think ended up gave you the edge on securing the nomination?
Well, it's for me, it was my sixth campaign. I was mayor for 12 years in Haldimand County, and then I ran a campaign provincially in Haldimand and Norfolk. And so having the experience, I think, gave the party some comfort that we could start late and get off the ground running pretty fast. We were able to, tap into some people in the area that were able to support us financially. And as you know, money and people are the number one resources for a good campaign. And so if you can't do both of those rather quickly, then it becomes a challenge. And so I think knowing that the writ had dropped, we were in the game. They, the other individuals that they could have possibly chosen were of less experience, and so I think that was maybe something that maybe put me over the edge for that decision.
So it sounds like you're not new to campaigning. What's your favorite part about campaigning? Like, what drives you? What do you like the most?
I love meeting people, getting out and banging on the doors, listening to people beat their chest and tell you how much they're in love with the Conservative Party and want to win, to someone telling you to get the heck off their property. And you get both. And I think it's truly, an interesting experience. I think everybody should try, just so that they can get an appreciation, understanding of what's going through their minds. Because as we, watch TV and listen to YouTube and different, mediums, everybody interprets things differently. And I think that when you're banging on the doors, you can truly appreciate that, and talking to people and understanding that, their interpretation of specific issue is completely different than the person down the street.
Well, and in my experience, in knocking on doors, I really enjoyed the challenge of people that were undecided, or they were leaning towards the Liberal Party or the NDP, but they gave you the opportunity to have a conversation with them. So what was the most fun for me in door knocking was seeing what you could do to win those people over. And there was more than a few that I was actually successful with. Does that give you a certain competitiveness when you're talking to those people as well?
100%. I mean, I love the challenge. I mean, if you don't appreciate challenge, then politics is probably not where you want to be. And when I was asked to consider the riding of Hamilton Mountain, a riding that hasn't been Conservative for over 45 years, most people looked at me and said I should have my head examined, and I saw it as an opportunity and a challenge. And what we were able to do in 2 weeks, with the team, I'm just over the moon impressed in that, to get just over 42% of the vote, that normally would win anywhere. And we had a number of ridings where we had 42% or more of the vote and didn't win. But to get that level of support in Hamilton Mountain in such a short period of time is inspiring and exciting for us moving forward into the future.
Yeah, especially because when the Conservatives were polling at 47 nationally in December, Hamilton Mountain was still a toss-up. It was still really, really close. So the fact that even after everything had kind of swung, that there was less than 3% between the Liberal winner and you as the Conservative candidate, I think that says a lot in terms of how much people even in Hamilton, which is generally a more Liberal NDP kind of city, have really gravitated towards the Conservatives. And you must have been seeing that at the doors.
We heard it many, many times. I've never voted Conservative. This is the first time I'm voting Conservative. I've been an NDP all my life. I'm not voting there, or I've been a Liberal and I'm disenchanted. So we did hear all of that. And I think, like I say, the most unique thing was the city was ready for change and wanted change. And we saw it, as you know, down in Stony Creek with Ned Couric. We saw it even in downtown Hamilton Center with the dramatic changes there. And so So to get to the level that we did, and as I say, to get almost 25,000 votes, conservative votes on Hamilton Mountain, I don't think it's ever been done before. And so now the role, the function, and our task in front of us is to ensure those 25,000 votes stay with us moving forward.
And how do we do that? Because there's a lot of people that are disappointed with the election results, and there's a lot of speculation as to what happened, when it happened. How do you go from almost getting there to keeping that fortitude to say, all right, now we got to restart and start all over again? So how do you do that?
Well, earlier we talked about how you stick around being a Leaf fan. You have to continue to push forward, and I think that's the same analogy. Is that this, out of the campaigns that I've been involved in, this was the most exciting, most dynamic, most fun campaign. Am I disappointed that I'm sitting here talking about it today? Yeah, obviously I am. But I got a lot out of this campaign, and it rejuvenated the juices in me from many years of why I wanted to be involved in politics. And I feel that there is still a lot more for myself and the party to accomplish over the next couple of years. And so this is part of the process, and ensuring that the public in Hamilton Mountain knows that Ken Hewitt is still committed to the riding and committed to the party and committed to working towards representing that riding. And that's what we will be endeavoring to do over the next couple of years.
And that's similar to the message that we've been telling Canadians, is that one of the things that we really need to do, if we really want permanent change in this country, is we need to get to work right away. We can't wait until the writs drop. We can't wait until it looks like the Liberals are having trouble. We need to start right away, get involved, and help out your EDA, because this is the next starting line. Would you agree with that?
Yes, and that's I think if I had a mistake that I could point to, is deciding to commit to running in this election at a later stage left us somewhat handcuffed, and I think that it's important that we, come together with the association. We bring the right people within the riding that want to participate and be a part of that association, and share the same goal to ultimately win. And if given the proper runway and the opportunity to do the fundraising that we need, as well as get the right people there, I believe the Hamilton Mountain is a conservative riding in the next election.
And we've seen that, because that's the same story that happened with Ned Curick in the last campaign. He ran before, did pretty well, and then his team prized themselves on being one of the hardest working in the country, and then they got that over the finish line despite polling 20 points down on April 26th, and they captured the riding. Connie Cody, same thing. She was almost in your exact same shoes in the 2021 election. I think she was confirmed with maybe a month left, and it was trial by fire. She did okay, and then that entire 4 years from that election up until now, she has committed herself to try and turn that riding blue, ended up succeeding. So that's the good news for people that are in your situation, is it's been proven that you can do that if people are willing to put in the work and really get after it.
I heard, as I say, in 2 weeks we hit, I'm going to say 30,000 doors. Not as many as we'd like, as much as we could. What I did hear, and many times, was I'm not certain where I want to lean, and I'm a little bit concerned about some of the messaging that's come out of the one party, and then I'm a little concerned about some of the leadership on the other side. And what I was able to gain, though, from a number of people was the fact that you're the only person that came and banged on my door. You're the only person that took the time to listen to my concerns. You're going to get my vote. And so, that is the 6 to 8, 9, 10 months that I need to be able to hit the other 30, 40,000 homes, because there is a disenfranchised group of people out there that do not know where to vote and park their vote sometimes, usually wherever the media says so, in the last couple of days of an election.
And that was even reflected in a Abacus poll, I think, done in January, and again in March, where 20% of people they polled said, "I'm going to decide who I'm going to vote for in the last 72 hours." Yeah. I'm not sure what they were looking at to make that decision, but I think it's just because the majority of Canadians, they're not paying attention to politics every single day. They are busy going to work, trying to earn a living, trying to pay that rent that they can't afford, trying to buy those groceries that they can't afford. And they don't have time to understand what is the SDTC scandal, what's a Arrive can. Most Canadians don't know about that. It's the people that are plugged in that have been paying attention that know that. And those people are typically going to be voting Conservative anyway.
It's interesting you raise that, because that's the disconnect between politicians and most Canadians as well, is politicians continue to think that they're providing a service and a valuable idea for the public. In essence, what we've been seeing and what's happening and what's motivated me to participate in the federal politics is we are providing these programs and services and in some way making our tax-paying public dependent on those services. And we've displaced a number of middle-class, blue-collar, hard-working families to lower class because of all the different programs that we're telling them we're giving them for free, but they're being taxed so much for it that they can't put food on the table. And that's what we heard on the along the campaign trail, is that people want government to get out of the way and allow them to earn a reasonable living and be able to provide, a comfortable lifestyle for their families.
And I think that's where we've seen problems, especially in Western democracies over the last 20 years or so, where governments have moved to introduce more socialism into society that makes people dependent, that, removes choice from people on what they want to do. And it seems the goal of these far left parties is to make people so dependent on the government that they would never, ever vote for anybody else because they would be scared to lose those programs. And that's what we heard as part of the messaging of the Liberals and the NDP is, well, they'll take away dental care. They'll take away these programs. Well, those programs have to be really good in order to be worried about taking them away. And this is what we saw. So, but people have to remember that 15, 20 years ago, you had a lot more money in your pocket, and our healthcare system was better. And it was less socialist back then than it was now. Not necessarily the healthcare system, but you weren't forced into a dentist. You weren't forced into childcare. And because people had more money in their pocket, a lot of families didn't need childcare because you didn't have to have two parents actually working in order to make ends meet.
That's right. I'm not opposed to dental care or different national child care. But I am opposed to having 4 or 5 programs that are doing a mediocre job versus having a program that's robust and providing a good program for those that are in need. And so why would we not master our healthcare system and ensure that it's providing the services that are required across the country before we introduce another program? And I think that is an issue, that is a disconnect between our current politicians, those that are involved in making legislation, versus those on the street that are saying, we want these programs, but we want them to work. If they're not working for us, then the ultimate goal is lost.
It's what we say to our audience. Would I like a gold toilet seat? Sure, but I'm not going to get a solid gold toilet seat if I can't afford it. Yeah. Would we like dental care? Sure, but should we be getting dental care when we can't afford it? No. And it's a sad metaphor, but if you can't even afford to eat, what need do I have of dental care in the first place? And that's the tragic question so many Canadians are asking.
Well, and we heard it again, though, and I know that you've heard it many times as well. Banging on these doors, most people's basements are their apartments for their children, because the children can't afford to buy a home. They can't get out on their own like we did as youngsters. And so what are we providing? If we can't help our youth gainfully get a home, get out on the out from under the roofs of their families and their parents, if we can't help them, then what are we doing? We're not. I don't think we're serving our public and serving the people well if we're not giving our youth an opportunity for a future like we've had.
For sure. Now, when it comes to when it comes to the campaign, you talked about what went really well. What didn't go so well?
I think the challenge within the Conservative Constitution is that they traditionally are trying to work with the EDAs and work with the ridings in bringing candidates through the system. And the problem is that just because you wake up one day and say, I'd like to be a candidate, doesn't mean you'd be the ideal candidate. And I think there has to be some latitude in the Constitution to ensure that when there are opportunities for candidates with reasonable or good experience or have the capacity to be able to perform the duties as an MP or MPP or local politics, they possess those skills and they're not just put into positions because of a popularity contest. And these nominations that go on across these contests that go on across the country tend to become just that. And so sometimes the unintended consequence is getting a candidate maybe that is there because of popularity, but not necessarily there because of their abilities. And so I think the party needs to work with the associations to ensure that there's room within their constitution to allow for that. And I believe that's going to help them be better prepared and stronger as they get into an election. In our case, as I say, the Constitution doesn't allow for appointments to occur before the writ drops. So, as you mentioned earlier, there was a number of seats that were vacant, and they were vacant because they probably weren't allowed to appoint, the candidate that they felt that would be best in that particular scenario. So now they're scrambling for that first week of the campaign to get those people in place. So they're starting behind, and I think if we can enable the associations and the party to be able to work together to come up with a strategy that's better prepared for the election.
And as a result of that, do you think there needs to be a modification or an examination of that screening process before they get theirs? Because for people that don't know, I got a taste of this, is that you don't just say, to your point, I'm going to be a candidate, and then all of a sudden you're the candidate. There's a process that you have to go through. You have to lay down a bond in terms of I believe it's $1,000, and you get that back eventually. But
still working.
If you're a good boy, if you're a good boy, and then they go through examining your social media and things like that, just to make sure that there's not going to be anything problematic. But in terms of competency, do you think there needs to be, the party needs to take another look at how that's done, and even if it's done in a very similar systemic fashion across the country? Because I get a feeling that one riding may look at, one candidate in one way and one in a different way.
That is a challenge. It's, what determines the competency. My friend down the street wants to run, and he's a really nice person, and I'm going to support them. Or goes to the local church, and gets 200-300 people that says, "Oh, I'm going to support them." But does that necessarily make that person the one that can win the riding and also represent the riding in a way that the people are looking for? So it does present a challenge, because at the same time, I think the Conservative Party certainly has cut its teeth on the whole idea of being grassroots and ensuring that the public has the ability to nominate and freely decide on who their candidates can and should be. So it's balancing that part along with the competency or insurance that the people that are being chosen or being recommended are the ones that are going to be get us through the finish line. Because ultimately it's winning the majority, it's winning government, and then it's being in a position to influence. So we have to be cognizant of that. And that's, I think, the true dilemma that the party faces, is how do we do that within the Constitution without taking away that grassroots ideology that sort of what that builds the Constitution on.
And just to be clear for those watching, we're not suggesting that all of the candidates that ran were unqualified. That's not what we're saying here. It's whenever there's a loss, I think it's prudent upon the party to put it this way. When I was in IT and we had a big problem, we called it a major incident that took down part of the company or a critical system of the company, even if it was just for an hour or a day. If it was a day, I'd probably be fired. But if it was an hour, we would do a postmortem afterwards. And a lot of people understand what this term is, but it is a unapologetic look at what happened from a factual standpoint, from the point that something was detected to the point where you resolved it. What happened, and how can we A, mitigate that from happening next time, and B, what can we put in place from processes, technology, or people to ensure that even if it does happen, we can recover that much quicker. So when I looked at what followed the election, my postmortem hat came on, and I started looking at, okay, we've heard from across the country that there were some technology issues with the apps that people were using for data, that was a problem. And people were even using different apps from one routing to another. That's a problem. And, training of people. Some people got training, some people got no training. And, what's a campaign manager? What do they do? Some people just figured it out. Some people had done it before. So there seems to be a lot of, I would say, lack of a standard, lack of process, whereas in some writings there was a lot of support, a lot of process, a lot of training. So if you want to replicate success of the really strong writings, in my opinion, it's incumbent upon the Conservative Party to do a real in-depth postmortem on the writings that worked and the writings that didn't work, and find out how can you bridge that gap. As we say, your rising tide lifts all ships.
No, exactly. And I think that waiting till a month before an election is brewing to start looking at training or looking at different things for these candidates it's too late. And in the past they would have all these candidates all nominated well in advance of an election, and there was a stringent 6 weeks, 8 weeks of training that they would go to, where they would learn, the whole idea of what's your team look like, what's the important roles, what are those roles and functions that need to be filled, what kind of qualities do you need to look for in the candidate to be in those roles, and then how many volunteers. I mean, I say 100, 150. I've had the good fortune of running campaigns with just 3 or 4 family members and finding out that doesn't work so well. and so you do need a lot of help and a lot of people, and you can't just pull that out of a hat in a week. And so I think it's fair to say that the party, and I wouldn't isolate it just to the Conservative Party, because we saw the Liberals were struggling with filling some seats at the start of the election.
And the NDP.
And the NDP. And so I think all of them are responsible in ensuring that there's going to be another election, certainly within the next 3 or 4 years. And so there's no excuse anywhere between 2 years from now, as far as I'm concerned, that those seats are not all filled with candidates and ready to go. And they've been trained, fully prepared, and everybody starts off on the same playing field. And it can happen. The communication you mentioned as well, and I think that there's 2 things at play. I mean, there's government that's in session today, and then there's the election, and those are parties that are operating independently to win an election, and it's somehow trying to pull those groups in a way together. Although some of them are the same players. It's trying to pull them together so that while we're in government, and as we are today, the parties are still independently working to ensure that we're ready, we're prepared for the next step. And I think that despite the fact that there was a looming election over the last couple of years, I think we could have been better prepared. And a number of things were thrown at him. And, in fairness, I mean, there was a change in leadership and then, a presidential election down south that certainly changed the dynamics here. So a lot of things happened in messaging, but my opinion, there's no reason why we couldn't have been more prepared within the 6 months of the February writ.
Well, and as Pierre has said a couple of times now, he wants to position the 144 Conservative members of Parliament right now as a government in waiting, which to me, then what follows is then you need to have the rest of the candidates basically selected as soon as reasonably possible as a election win in waiting, so that is not an excuse for potentially another loss.
Exactly. And what I'm hoping to see, although our system is leadership centric, and I recognize and respect that, but what I'm hoping to see is that the party that I think will win the next majority government is the party that highlights the strengths of each of the candidates and current MPPs that are on the slate. Because although you're voting for a prime minister, there's still a cabinet of 20, 30, 40 people. Well, that bench strength is what determines the value of that party in itself and governing party. So if we can work to highlight those individuals, and so that when you're going to cast your ballot, you're looking at the team as a whole and saying, that's a strong team. I can get behind that group. And that man, the leader, is going to lead that team, through the finish line. So I think if we can think that way, and as well as candidates, and ensure that those new candidates that come on, the party recognizes, highlights those candidates, highlights their strengths, so that when the team is traveling through the different parts of the country, those individuals are noted and made sure that the public is aware of, well, who are these people? It's not just a name on a sign, it's this individual.
Well, and I think that comes down to people staying involved. And our message to people is, if you're involved with your EDA, great, stay involved. You can be potentially part of new policy proposals that make it into the next Conservative convention. I think that's expected to be sometime in the fall, but that hasn't been announced yet. And if you're interested in possibly becoming a candidate, get involved with your EDA so you start to get a taste of what is actually involved and what is an EDA and what are the roles and what comes with that. So, because I think this grassroots movement needs to continue to grow in order to ensure that the Conservatives come out of the next election with a majority government.
No, you hit it right on the head. It's people need to appreciate and understand that the campaign doesn't start when the writ drops in the election. The campaign starts 3 months, 6 months, 3 years before that. And the investment of time, the work involved behind the scenes, so that when the writ drops, you're already running. And I think that's the mistake that I'm guilty of. And I'm prepared to own it. I was slow to the gate. I was kind of thinking I was semi-retired, but I decided that I was I wasn't ready, and so here I am. But yeah, no, I think it's important to be involved and engage the association, engage the public, make sure that they are aware that you're here, you're in the game, and you're ready to go. And the sooner you can do that, the better that riding will do.
All right. Well, we will be watching closely, and good luck to you in your quest over the next couple of years towards the next election. And thank you for coming on Northern Perspective today.
Well, again, thanks for having me and allowing me to share the message. And I hope that we have many more to come.